Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's webinar conversation. I'm Lucy Feagins, founder and editor of The Design Files, and I'm here tonight with Keti Lytras, who is the head of creative here at Globe West. And we're here at Globe West's stunning Melbourne headquarters for a conversation around design and interiors trends. We'll also be responding to a few of your questions, which I know some of you sent through earlier in the week. We're here also to celebrate the launch of Globe West's Collections 2022 Volume 2, which is an extensive collection of 6 furniture collections and I believe over 250 products across rugs, furniture and homewares. Is that right?
Yep.
So there's lots to discuss this evening. So as I mentioned, I'm Lucy Feagins from The Design Files. Keti Lytras is with us and she is head of creative at Globe West. And a little later on, we'll also be hearing from Jessica Rock, who is head of national sales at Globe West. So before we get into this discussion around trends, I did want to give you a brief introduction to Keti. So Keti's role here at Globe West is extremely varied. She is responsible for trend forecasting and product design and leads an incredible team of product designers. And she's also very involved in the styling and creative direction of all of Globe West's campaign imagery and of course the beautiful catalogues that you all receive. Keti is a true creative with a background in fine art and textile design, and she's been with Globe West for 8 years now.
Nearly 8 years.
Yeah, a long time.
It's gone fast.
And of course, she also has the most incredible team. And one thing I didn't really realize until we started working together in preparation for this conversation was, I guess, the scale of the design team here and also the skill set that all of your team have. So tell us a little bit about what it looks like behind the scenes in the design team.
First of all, for me, I'm really happy to be talking to you. It's really great to have this time to chat about exciting interior things. I guess I became a designer because I really believe that beauty can change people's lives. And I think, you know, beauty, it really is in the eye of the beholder, and you could switch that word up to, you know, harmony or resonance, but I think beauty is incredibly important to all of us. And great design, you know, it really has a very serious impact on how people feel, and I think that's a really valuable thing that we as designers can create. I also think, you know, that creative moment when something just works really beautifully, especially in design, when you have an idea and you push it as far as you can, and it sort of comes to fruition, and there's that intuitive knowingness when something just feels really right. That's something that truly excites me. And having a team, the team that I work with, that's even bigger than it was a couple of years ago, it's fantastic to be able to have that team and work really closely with them to make all this happen. So we're also really fortunate that Steve and Alan, who are the owners of this company, have really invested in design and see it as really an important part of their business. And yeah, on the slide there you see the design team and the product team as well. All the guys at the top are industrial designers, and then on the bottom row there you have our product team, which we work very closely with. We're a very collaborative business, and the guys, the product guys, have a lot of insight into the designs that we create and also bring them to market. It's really important that the pieces that we design are brought to market on time. So yeah, a fantastic team, and it's a really exciting time to be working with everyone.
Yeah, it definitely feels busy. I can't believe you've released, is it 6 new furniture collections in this capsule alone? So it's like a very busy bunch of people behind the scenes making it all happen.
Yeah, it's busy, but it's really good fun, you know, and we work quite far ahead. So we're already working on things going forward, and I guess there's a lot of overlapping in how we work, but yeah, no, it's good fun.
Yeah, amazing. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about 4 key design trends, and you know, there's no limit to the trends we could talk about, but we've decided to sort of hone in on 4 key themes. So the themes we'll be chatting about tonight are maximum texture, warm tones, so talking there about color palette and color trends, luxe minimalism, and then also talking about curvature in forms and in architecture and interiors. Now, you know, at the Design Files, we shoot beautiful Australian homes week in, week out, and we certainly do see so much newness when it comes to architecture and interior design. And one of the key things that we've been seeing so much of in the last 2 years especially has been texture, and I'm talking on every surface of the house. So particularly noticeable on walls, because I think Australian interiors have just become so brave with texture on the walls in the past few years. So we're seeing really bespoke surfaces on walls, so that sort of polished plaster, very artisanal custom finishes on walls, and also on flooring, so texture underfoot, with whether it be tiles or stone or brick. And so this really sort of Mediterranean feel coming through, where every single surface in a home has got this element of texture to it. And of course, we're also seeing so much of that translate through textiles and fabrics. So a lot of texture in upholstery and even in window furnishings and that sort of thing. So what sort of fabrics and textures are you guys working with in the design team, and how are you seeing that play out in your collections?
Look, I think texture is always really key for interiors, especially the layering of texture as well. And like you were saying before about Mediterranean flooring, we're seeing a lot of these tile floors, and on a tile floor you need warmth. So a lot of rugs, I think we've been working on a lot of rugs for the range, and making sure we've got different textures within the rugs, and hand loop rugs, and they're just beautiful underfoot. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And then in terms of fabrics, of course, the boucle, we've been talking about boucle for the last year or so,
yeah.
And that certainly isn't going away. It's more of the more complex weaves that we're seeing going even further, which I think is really exciting, and adding more colour as well to those textures. And then in timber itself, we've been playing around quite a bit with CNC carving in wood, which is beautiful and adds that sort of other layer of texture, to a space as well. And I think what excites me actually is more the contrast you get of different textures as well. If you've got like a very cool marble against more of a textured rug, it's those contrasts, which is really exciting too. So yeah, also adds a lot of warmth, texture. So,
yeah, I definitely feel that like people are becoming a lot braver with introducing multiple different textures into a space, and sort of understanding the comfort that brings, and the sort of the complexity that can bring to a space. So yeah, it's definitely a brave time, I think, when it comes to the texture in the home.
Yeah. And also, I think on the slide that the guys are seeing at the moment, those velvets are becoming a bit more more of a matte finish, which I think is really beautiful as well. And again, it adds that more sort of luxe feel as well to a space. But yeah, it's all about feeling cozy in terms of the upholstery.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next trend of the evening. So we're talking about colour, and what we're really talking about here is this incredible resurgence we've seen of warm palettes in Australian and New Zealand interiors. So, 5 years or so ago, I feel like every home that we were seeing was very much based in a cool colour palette. So cool whites and a lot of grey, so many greys, whether it be in furniture, in window furnishings, carpets, all that stuff was very much sitting in a very neutral, cool territory. And over the past sort of 2 or 3 years, there's been this incredible resurgence of warm tones and a very sort of tonal palette. So the obvious thing is, browns, terracottas, reds, those colours, but I think it's also about the neutrals themselves that have been warming up. So whites that have a warm undertone to them that really work back with those warm timbers and the warm, deeper colours as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've certainly seen, there'll always be a place for grey. Grey's not going to totally disappear, but we're certainly seeing the percentage of greys becoming a lot more warm.
Yeah.
And the importance of those neutrals, whether they be beiges or like the warmer creams and the whites as well, like you mentioned before. So certainly that warmth is going through the neutral palette, as well as more of the brighter colours.
Yeah.
The terracotta and the clays, the rusts, all those sort of really gorgeous, rich colours too. So yeah, very much the warmer tones are totally, they're important, and they make us feel warm, and they make us feel comforted too. One of our key design directions this year is called The Rising Sun, and that was predominantly sort of influenced by a trip I did to Sydney, where I really sort of experienced this wonderful warmth when I was up there. I've been in cold Melbourne, of course, but to have that contrast was just really beautiful and overwhelming. I think those warmer tones really have been important to our range.
Yeah,
I see it for sure.
And when we talk about like warm colours, as designers know, we're talking about a lot more than paint, colours and fabrics. There's so much warmth to be had when it comes to materials. So, wicker and rattan have been having this real moment in the spotlight, and the sort of warmth that those materials bring, but also leathers as well. And you know, even stone can be warm, you know, a travertine with a very warm beige undertone, or a marble with
Grand plain marble, yeah.
Exactly.
And also the timbers, I think that's what's really lovely, is people becoming a bit braver with mixing timbers. You know, for a long time it was very, you know, pale wood was all the people wanted.
Yeah.
And now, you know, using these beautiful rich oaks, antiques, and using both of those woods in a space, I think is becoming a bit more acceptable, which is really lovely. And I think there's almost this embracing of different patinas that maybe, you know, this sort of look to the sort of more bygone eras that we're sort of also experiencing.
Yeah.
These sort of elements of different patinas we're becoming quite more used to.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people are able to mix, especially timbers, a bit more.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I mean, it speaks to the homes that we live in Australia. You know, not everyone lives in a brand new house. So, you know, there's you know, mid-century homes. There's so much amazing 70s architecture we're seeing at the moment, with so much timber and brick, exposed brick. So those are the sort of colours that you know, that we live with already, that we can sort of embrace a bit more and do a bit less whitewashing of.
That's nice, isn't it? Instead of, I mean, we've got brick behind us here, but you know, instead of painting everything, keeping, you know, what's still around.
Yeah,
original architecture is lovely.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to a third trend. So we're talking about luxe minimalism. Now, this is a bit of a controversial one, because, you know, maximalist interiors have definitely had a really strong run in Australia, and will continue to do so. And I love those maximal spaces with a lot going on. But just in the last year, quite recently, I feel like there's this real return to a luxe minimalist sensibility as well. And I think it's interesting, you know, minimalism perhaps has a bit of a bad rap. And I don't think this is the sort of minimalism where we're seeing a real, we're not talking about Scandinavian minimalism or anything too utilitarian. We're talking about a minimalism where there are really luxe accents in a space, and there's really an elevated sense of restraint and an elegance that comes with that. So, I mean, some of the reference images you're seeing on screen at the moment, we're looking at minimalism where texture is first and foremost such a significant part of a space. So where a palette might be neutral, the texture really lifts. And also form, you know, pieces of furniture that have such a striking or distinctive form, where again the palette may be restrained, but there's these really strong shapes and organic forms in a space.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you see when it comes to minimalism?
I agree. I think these, we've sort of have been looking at these elevated neutrals. You know, it's not necessarily about having anything very clinical. It's having a neutral palette that has texture and depth to it as well, and that creates a sense of luxury. I mean, I was just thinking about marble and how widely marble is now being used in kitchens and bathrooms and in stairwells. It's like marble's having this huge moment as a material, you know, that really adds a real sense of luxury to a space. But I think also this minimalism, this luxe minimalism, also relates to a couple of different interior themes, whether it's contemporary or more of a classical space. I'm really seeing these classical elements being used in detail, in a very detailed way, just to add more of a timelessness about product. And I think creating, you know, a space that has this sort of element to it, you've got to be very aware of placement and the space around pieces.
Yeah.
And giving pieces room to breathe. I think that's really key in creating that sense of luxury as well, and you know, making, you know, the pieces that you have in your home appear really special because they are to you. You know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I think that's. And I know before you were talking about detail, and how, you know, these pieces. I guess when we're working and creating pieces for this theme, it's often, you know, the detail that makes it more beautiful. It's not about having something that's very fussy. That sort of sense of minimalism is focusing on the detail and the beauty of that and the simplicity of it too.
Yeah, I mean, detail is, or, you know, those minute accents that can elevate a piece, whether it be, you know, a door handle or just a piece of hardware, or in this case, the joinery, and in this case, you know, the sort of negative space in that beautiful armchair that appears to sort of defy gravity a bit, and even just space under a piece of furniture, like, you know, the fact that couch is really sort of floating there, it gives you that sort of space, that negative space in between the pieces. So it's
especially if you have a smaller space, you don't want everything that's really heavy. Having something that's lighter, I think, just creates a bit more, like you said, a bit more sort of room to breathe for things. And yeah, that chair's really comfortable. Actually, it doesn't quite look that comfortable because it's so structured looking, but it really supports your lower back. It's really gorgeous, that chair.
So stunning. I love it. So that's a brief overview on minimalism and the new sort of luxe minimalism that we're seeing. And I think now we're going to head into our fun trend. So we're talking about curvature. So this probably won't come as a surprise to anyone, but curves are big and they're back in a big way. We're seeing that definitely in architecture, you know, so many beautiful sculptural forms in architectural projects and interiors, but also, you know, cabinetry, which isn't really an area, fixed cabinetry particularly isn't really an area where we think of curves, but, you know, certainly we're seeing so much of that. And in the reference here, you're seeing that in that beautiful big curved island bench. And it really does take the edge off a very large piece of fixed furniture in a room when you introduce curves like that. But also, you know, those beautiful steel window frames we're seeing there that really create such a distinctive view and outlook and sort of draw your eye outside. And then, of course, the furniture, the inbuilt seating we're seeing there with that beautiful curve that just softens what could otherwise be quite a chunky piece of inbuilt seating. So curves are definitely everywhere. And, you know, I don't think they're new necessarily when it comes to loose furniture, but there's just so many different ways that we're seeing them being used in furniture design at the moment. So how's that playing out in your design work?
We're still very much into curves.
Yeah.
I think curves, the beautiful thing about curves is they're very easy to live with. It's easy to get around a piece when it has a curve. It's a lot more, there's a sense of ease about a space when you have a piece of furniture, you can get around easier.
Yeah.
It's also very restful on the eye. So I think that's quite beautiful. It's not so jarring, and it just has a restfulness that it can create in space as well. Curves are actually quite hard to make, so it's always a bit of a challenge. But I think, you know, curves are something we've been really committed to for the last year. We've worked really hard to create some beautiful pieces, I think, with these curves in them. And we're certainly working on things. We work, you know, a couple of seasons ahead, so we're certainly working on curves going forward. And I think, you know, I sort of asked a lot about the trend curve of curves, and we're still very much on that curve. And as you said, in architecture, I'm seeing lots of new architecture with these curves and arches still.
Yeah.
It's a very comforting, it's like a hug, you know, being around these curves. I think, you know, people find it very comforting. But I do think that, you know, there will come a time when more of these geometric shapes are going to start coming in and creating maybe more strength to a space as well.
Yeah.
That's sort of something that I've started looking at. But yeah, curves are good.
Yeah.
Curves.
Yeah. Now, I do really love this desk. So, you know, working from home has obviously been something many of us have been challenged by over the last couple of years. And I think a lot of us have been working from sort of ad hoc desk arrangements, and finally now we're starting to see interiors and new architecture really responding to this need, which is to have a really dedicated home office space or to have a versatile space within the home where you can work from. And what I love about this particular beautiful piece of furniture is the desk that you're seeing on screen now is, you know, it really elevates working from home and brings that sort of office into the home, but in a residential way. It doesn't feel sort of blocky or cubicle-like. It definitely feels like a piece of furniture for the home, but it does have that functional, beautiful purpose. So yeah, tell us a little bit about this beautiful piece of furniture.
Yeah, I think it's a statement. You know, we wanted to create, you know, as you said, with office in general, us working from home so much, we wanted to create a few things that were really hero and statement and beautiful, and not just something that you'd cram, like you say, in a corner at the back of another room.
Yeah.
Or that you just have to have banged up against the wall, but something that you can use almost as a piece of sculpture in a space. We also wanted to play with color, so I think it's in our Shiraz, I think we call that color.
Yeah.
Which I think is beautiful. It's not too jarring. It's warm, but it's also really sophisticated.
Yeah.
So yeah, very much. And looking at curves obviously as well. So especially with our office furniture at the moment, looking at how we can create some of these curves in our office pieces. But yeah, I think it's important to have hero pieces, especially in an office. And if you're going to be in there all day, and you've got the space, you know, then we wanted to have that sort of option for people.
Definitely. Well, I mean, we're used to seeing sort of elliptical shapes in tables, and, you know, there's a lot of interest in, you know, circular tables and that sort of thing, and obviously seating, but I don't think we expect to see it necessarily in furniture like this, but you can see how much it really does bring to a space to give it that soft edge. Stunning. So that was a really mad dash through 4 key sort of and dominant design themes that we've been seeing in Australian and New Zealand interiors over the past few years. And so just recapping quickly, that was maximum texture, warm tones, luxe minimalism, and curvature. And now I believe we're going to move on to a few of your questions that you've sent through over the last couple of weeks for Keti and I.
This is going to be good because the first question is for you, Lucy. How do you select residential projects to feature on the design files?
It's a good question. Yeah, I get asked this a lot, and I wish I had a really succinct criteria, but I don't. It can be quite intuitive. I think our audience really drive, the type of projects that we feature. We obviously see and respond to the engagement we see with different stories. And I think perhaps what we're looking for mostly is variety. So we don't like to pigeonhole the homes we feature. We really do like a lot of variety across the board. And what our audience does respond to a lot of the time is quite accessible spaces. So by that I mean not necessarily gigantic, very high budget projects, although we love those too. But our audience loves seeing tiny homes or apartment living, even rented spaces and spaces that really reflect real Australian lives and homes and are not necessarily overly aspirational, but have a sort of sense of realness about them. And the other thing our audience love is homes which have some heritage to them. So by that I mean mid-century homes, always very popular, and renovated, Victorian or Edwardian or other heritage homes, because those are the homes that so many of us live in. So yeah, a lot of variety across the board, but yeah, I think generally we really like to think that we feature real Australian homes.
And can I also ask, just in terms of some of the designers that are watching, if they have projects that they wanted to submit to you,
yeah,
do they have to be finished, or could they be sort of a bit of a snapshot of something they're beginning to work on?
Yeah, we do love an early heads up. We don't always get a sort of, a sneak peek at projects when they're in progress, but we do love that, and it's great to sort of have a bit of a advanced sort of, look at something. It's funny, we haven't historically featured before and after sort of on projects, but our audience absolutely love when we do show a sort of transformation from before to after, or a sort of progress shot. So I'm warming to the idea of showing some of those, before shots, because it really tells a story of the space when you can see that transformation. So
I think to see the journey of how people get there.
Yeah, definitely. And sort of just especially when a space goes from being quite generic to very personalized, I think people really respond to that and can really see how they might do that in their own space. So yeah, we love to see progress shots. So definitely love any pictures, and I know there's a lot of interior designers tuning in. So yeah, we love to see your work and to celebrate and champion the work of Australian interior designers.
Yeah, fantastic.
Another one for me.
Another one for you. What are the key areas of growth you're seeing in the Australian design industry?
This is such a good one. I feel that the Australian design industry, particularly interior design, is just seeing such enormous growth across the board. If you consider when I started the Design Files, which is 14 years ago now, I just feel the consumer, the public, are so much more informed about design now. There's such an interest in professional interior design, and as distinct from architecture. And so as an industry, the growth is incredible. Studios that we were featuring 5 years ago have doubled or tripled in size, and there's just so much work for these studios, which is fantastic to see. But if I was going to narrow down sort of one area that I think really is going through a massive change and a massive growth right now, it's actually decoration, so interior decoration and styling. So, by that I mean really the finishing touches in a space. So where a space may not need structural work, but needs some help with furniture selection, artwork, lighting, and those finishing touches and decorating. We get so many inquiries from our audience saying, I need help with this, I don't need any renovation work, but I really don't know how to choose the pieces that will really make my space sing or will really personalize my space. So we direct them to people, but there's definitely so much opportunity for that sector to grow and for more people to move into that space, and also for interior design studios to really flesh out their offering to cover that off and make sure that the projects that they put so much work into do end up furnished beautifully and really represent a finished product in that way. So decoration and sort of personal styling at home, I think, is definitely going to continue to grow.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
But yeah, it's an exciting time. Yeah.
Awesome.
A question for you. Okay, so this one is for Keti. What or where do you get influenced by and excited about when looking for new in homes and interiors? So I guess to simplify it would be, where do you get your inspiration?
Look, I think it probably sounds really boring, but most creatives will tell you you get influenced by anything around you. I was even driving down Dandenong Road yesterday and I saw this piece of graffiti and I was like, how can I pull over so I can take a picture of this? So I really do think things just, you get something that sparks that, that moment of excitement for you, just that then goes into your brain and somehow comes out in a different way. But I think also at the moment, what really interests me is how spaces can change people energetically and how they can make you feel.
Yeah.
You can often walk into a space and not quite know why it makes you feel calmer or more excited or more comforted. And that I find really fascinating, the use of colour that people are using without you even really knowing it and how that affects you. So that's what's really exciting me at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm probably influencing what I'm doing and being more, I guess, having a very intentional approach to what the pieces are that we're adding into the range. So
yeah. It's so true, that focus on how a space makes you feel. And I'm sure, interior designers know that's the language that you speak. But I think, we can sometimes become sidetracked by beautiful imagery and the pictures we see of spaces and what spaces look like. But really, the powerful thing is actually what it feels like to enter that space, to walk into that space, and the mood that it sort of creates. So that's definitely sort of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think imagery is really interesting. You can style something for an image and you can style something to live in it. It's two very different things.
Yeah.
And to be really comfortable in a space, you need things around you that make you feel comfortable. You need something where you can put your drink. You need a light near you so you can actually see what you're doing. Those little things I find really, can create such an extra element of comfort for a guest or someone.
Yeah.
That really, creating these spaces that are cocooning and all the ways you can do that, I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's like psychology.
Yeah.
All right, do we have any more questions? Oh, for both of us, this one, do it.
Well, I'll ask you first.
Okay.
What is the best piece of advice, design or otherwise, that you have ever been given? That's a good one.
Okay, so it's not about design, so it's more sort of general or career advice maybe, I guess. But yeah, a long time ago, someone said this to me, and I think it's sort of become a bit of a motto that I return to when I feel like I'm in need of a bit of direction, and it's lean into it. So what I mean by that is, when you sort of have a goal in mind or you want to sort of get somewhere, but you're not sure of the path to get you there. You're not sure of the steps that you need to take necessarily. You're not quite sure exactly how to get there, but you sort of have this goal in mind. That idea of leaning into it and using momentum. So just leaning forward, leaning in the direction you want to go, even if you don't know the full sort of path to get there. There's so much power in that momentum and in leaning forward. And I guess it's sort of like, just telling the universe that you're heading in that direction, even if you're not quite sure or quite confident in exactly what the outcome will be. Because I can be perfectionist and sort of, that can definitely hold me back at times. So when I need to be reminded to just trust the universe and lean forward a bit, the momentum, will carry you. So that's my motto.
To make it less overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to sort of give yourself permission to not have all the answers, at the start of a project. So yeah, lean into it is my little motto in life these days.
Beautiful.
But now I need to ask you this question. So what's the best piece of advice you have been given?
I think the last time someone asked me this, I just said breathe, because I find that breathing is really important when you're stressed and all the difficulties that we can face. But I guess the biggest thing that I've probably come back to, similar to what you mentioned before, is I practiced and studied Buddhism for a very long time. And one of the things I learned through my practice is to be more conscious of the energy that you're bringing into a space. So, before you walk into a meeting, before you walk into anywhere where there's someone else, really be aware of what you're bringing to that space. And that's sort of a check-in thing that I do. Sometimes I don't do it so well, but you know, just reset and try it again. So that's something that I try and consistently, I'm consistently conscious about when I remember.
Yeah. Okay, that's really powerful. I think a lot of people don't think about that, the energy they bring into a space. Yeah,
I think, you know, we've been away from people a lot, and especially in Melbourne, we've been in lockdown quite a lot. And we've been maybe working from home and returning to an office, you know, suddenly around all these people, and, you know, we're going to movies again, we're going into all these sort of public spaces and not necessarily always used to it anymore. So I think it's been, something just to think about.
Yeah, I love that. Very powerful.